I'd always known there was something wrong, but my brother used to say it was psychosomatic.
We went to different doctors, but there was even doctors who said that I was lazy.
My parents used to say, oh, she's slow, she's slow.
Even my husband said one day that I was just lazy. And I burst into tears because I said, I'm not lazy. I said, there's something wrong. But nobody would listen.
We got a lot of the same type of thing of trying to pass off the whole thing as being deconditioned, which was confusing because I was always active. So it started to become clear, what was going on, that it was McArdle's disease.
There are about 14 glycogen storage diseases at the moment, and the one that's most numerous in the number of diagnosed cases is McArdle disease.
McArdle disease is a genetic disorder that results in a lack of an enzyme called muscle glycogen phosphorylase. And without that enzyme, people have difficulty initiating movements, so walking for the first 2 or 3 minutes, and also great difficulty in sustaining strenuous activities such as walking up stairs, walking up hills, running, or lifting and carrying heavy items.
If you are reaching to put plates away or something, that is quite a stretch with your arms. But also if you're standing on tiptoe, that's what we call a static activity. Just reaching those mugs out now, I noticed it starting on one side.
People don't understand because I look perfectly all right. I had a wonderful relationship with my parents, but I don't think they ever understood completely. They felt guilty.
This is what we call a recessive disorder, which means that to have the condition, people need to inherit an abnormal gene from both their mother and their father. We're now using genetic testing where we will screen, particularly in the UK population, a hotspot mutation in the gene, and that will diagnose about 80% of patients.
The first molecular studies were performed around the 2000, just 15 years ago. So we still have a lot of things to learn about.
It is quite steep, isn't it? Immediately I knew that there was a serious illness involved and that there was no treatment for it. I was told I was number 50 in the world roughly to be diagnosed, and so there was no real understanding or knowledge of how to deal with it. So I just had to work it out for myself.
As in many other rare disorders, treatments are empiric, especially in those disorders that they rely on a genetic cause.
At the minute, we know probably more about things that don't work than we do about things that do.
I actually stopped my mountain walking things, thinking that would be a bad thing to be doing. And it was a few years on from that I realised that wasn't going to suit me, that I was actually getting worse by not being active.
Some doctors, they're still telling the patients that they shouldn't exercise, and that is definitely not true. Exercise is essential because it keeps the muscle alive and functioning.
What I'm doing here is just using the treadmill to maintain my daily exercise. On a typical exercise assessment, a McArdle's person will be asked to walk as far as they can, but without any pain going beyond a threshold, which will mean perhaps that you start off slowly, you may speed up, but then the pain starts, so you have to slow down again. Then the second wind comes in at about 8 minutes, and then you can speed up again.
But almost everybody with McArdle disease will exhibit something called a second wind. The body starts to utilise other energy sources from fats, for example, and the more aerobically fit they are, the easier it will be and the more efficient it will be for them to get into a second wind.
The major change for me was when somebody who I'd met came over from Australia and we were able to go out and walk together, and that was the first time I'd actually walked with somebody with McArdle's, and it was really interesting to compare notes. It's led on to developing that into a course in an environment that is supportive and understanding because it's other people with McArdle's. What the patient groups can do is to try to share those experiences amongst people with McArdles, but also hopefully involve professionals in that, so that there's a greater understanding from the medical profession about the real impact of McArdles.
The biggest challenge in disseminating information about McArdle disease is the fact that it's a rare disorder. So the majority of teachers, GPs, paediatricians will probably never see an affected patient in their lifetime. So somehow we need to get the message across that perhaps this condition might be more common than we think. And I think this is where the Euromac registry will be very, very helpful.
So the project started 1 month ago, and the goal is to create a single European registry trying to collect all European patients with McArdle disease, as well as other rare muscle glycogenolytic disorders. When we have large group of patients, we will be able to perform double-blinded clinical trials demonstrating that proper exercise protocols have a strong benefit on the clinical course of the disease.
It's also really important that people are educated not to perform the activities that cause muscle damage and put themselves at risk of acute collapse, acute kidney failure and a stint in intensive care.
I worked hard. I was working on a 200-ton press where the mouldings were coming off at 1 a minute. I was doing 12-hour shifts, 5 days a week, which I think is why that my condition, being in a wheelchair now for 13 years, is it's just put so much strain on my body. Had I known, I'd have been diagnosed earlier, then obviously I wouldn't have done it.
Most of these patients have been dismissed for years, and for them has been very, very hard because they have been jumping from one hospital to another one without a clear diagnosis.
I was diagnosed and then I said, thank you. I knew it. I could have gone into town and gone up on top of the town hall and shouted it from the rooftops if I could have got up the steps.
It's really important that people are diagnosed early, because that enables them to get the right advice and to understand their McArdles and work with it to best effect. This year I organised a trip to the Dolomites in Italy. So for instance, the 3 young guys who came on the trip to the Dolomites had all been diagnosed relatively early. It would be a challenge for anybody, but with McArdles it was a significant challenge.
If you're aware of what it is at an early age and you start figuring out what you can and can't do, you realize there's far more that you can do than you can't.
The big achievement of Euromac would be in the future to be able to provide a platform for early diagnosis of McArdle disease, and also to be as a platform for the development of effective clinical trials. So in the future, we may have a cure for the disorder. That will take a while, but if we don't take that step, we will never go to that point.